want to go back to an anecdote or a moment back when I was competing in judo, and I was all pumped up. What am I going to do? What am I going to do to this, to my opponent? And my coach at the moment just said, "Hey, you don't have to do anything. You know everything. When you step on that mat, it's all about that first 2 seconds of attitude. The way you step into any arena, whether it's the mat, it's your presentation you're going to make, it's a big conference call, that first 2 to 3 minutes, or I should say, first 2 to 3 seconds actually, of how you enter that domain is what determines how the rest of the journey is going to play."
Welcome to the Happy Engineer podcast, the place where we help engineers like you to build your career, balance your life, and be happy. I'm Zach White, former engineer turned lifestyle engineering coach, and your host for the journey to the career and life that you desire. Hey, I believe that you shouldn't have to sacrifice your life to reach your full potential at work. And what we're going to bring you in these conversations and interviews are the strategies, the tools, and the mindsets that are going to allow you to experience both success at work and success at home. Hey, we do the best we can to keep this free from advertisements. Of course, I can't control what YouTube may throw up, but do us a favor and share this podcast with anybody who you think may like it. And don't forget to click the bell and subscribe and get notifications to our YouTube channel and for upcoming releases of the Happy Engineer podcast. I would love your feedback, and even more than that, love your story. Share with us how these strategies and tools are working for you. Would love to be in touch with you. Connect with us on social media. Find me at Oasis of Courage on Instagram, Facebook, or Zach White on LinkedIn. It's an absolute pleasure to serve you. Now let's do this. So glad you're back, engineers. I am excited about today's guest. I'm here with Hansel Ramathal, and he is a development engineer, global key account manager for Celanese, where he's got 21 years with the organization, and he's got a special place in my heart because Hansel is a client of mine from a while back. We worked together here at OACO, and he has so many incredible areas and domains and dimensions to his life, to his journey, and has just been a joy to partner with and to coach, and really excited to share some of what he brought into my life through that journey, and then share some of his own growth and experiences with you today. Hansel, thanks a ton for making time for us.
Thank you, Zach, for having me on this podcast. I really am honored to have a chat with you.
Thanks, man. Hey, where to begin? There's 1,000 places we could, but one of the things that I really loved in hearing your description of your experience working with OACO and discovering some of your own path and journey for your career and growth and stretching to the next level was the aha moments. You talked a little bit about having these aha moments, and I really like the way that you described it when we were working together. And I was wondering if you could take us back and just explain a bit of what that means to you to have an aha moment and your experience with that as we partnered together.
Yeah, I'm happy to. When I was in the program, it was really a time that I could focus on myself a little bit deeper. And in some of those focus sessions, I came to this realization that what I was going through in the modules was no different than when I'm actually on the mat doing my judo work. I felt that my posture, my stance, my attitude was really defining where that next movement would come from. And it was in that aha moment that I realized that I have a choice on how I'm going to act in the next instance. And your modules bring that into very good connection because they tell you that based on that, you create the action that you're going to deliver on. And that's exactly what happens to me in the 10 seconds that I have to think on a judo mat.
Hmm. Do, do you feel like it's possible for someone totally on their own to go on a similar journey and have these type of aha moments? Or what's the catalyst? Maybe that's the question I'm curious about in your journey to having that light bulb turn on.
Zach, you mentioned a very engineering and chemical word, catalyst, and coming. That's another of my passions is chemical engineering. Catalyst always comes not by oneself. Even a catalyst needs to act with another. And in these aha moments, even though I felt it was at just me at that moment, there is a group of people around me, colleagues, and in this case, being part of the OECO family, there was the OECO group that we would have discussions with. All those tidbits of information play into these aha moments. When we're doing anything, even I'm going to go back to judo because that's kind of where I relate to. Even
Yeah.
on that mat, as much as I want to filter out distracting thoughts, there is subconsciously an interaction that I had with colleagues, friends, family, coaches that come into that 5 seconds of a
Mm.
subconscious decision that you make. You can only reflect on it later on, but at that moment, that's what drives you to your next action. So, in what you just shared right now, there was a catalyst in those aha moments. That was because I had started to go through this group work with you and your other clients and started to focus on what needs to change, what needs to be reflected upon, and what's the next stance I take.
I love that. Started to focus on it. So I'm not a martial artist, but I love hearing you talk about it. Tell us first, when did you start in judo?
My judo journey has been very interesting. It was actually I started it when I was maybe 8 or 9. And at the
Awesome.
time, it was my mother's antidote to getting two boys out of her afternoon and
Sure.
go fight somewhere else.
I love it.
Except as
Go
you know,
fight somewhere else.
right? Except as you know, judo is not about fighting. It's actually about avoiding the fight, but being able to defend oneself.
Yeah, actually, tell me more about that. The differences between different martial arts and where judo sits in that world. Maybe just go a little further. I imagine the engineer listening may not practice judo or know anything about what's the difference between karate or judo or jujitsu. Just give us a little understanding on where judo fits in that world.
Yeah. This is. I'll try to be very brief. As you know, martial arts historically started in the monasteries. Monks wanted to defend themselves, and so they'll practice these arts because they had plenty of time on their hand. And there's a lot of meditative practices involved in that. That evolved into today's judo as one of the modern martial arts. And judo was created by a gentleman in Japan named Jigoro Kano. And what he did was, as a student of other martial arts, he observed that injuries were very rife. And to take out injuries, to create some sense of community contribution to the society and personal health, he created judo, a combination of wrestling, karate without the punching, and jujitsu, ancient Japanese, excuse me, ancient Japanese jujitsu, which involves locks and holds. So what you see today on camera with judo is a combination of movement, throwing, wrestling like throwing, and then pinning down. And inside all that is the nucleus of the original martial arts, which is what does your internal self feel like? That's what will come outside.
Hmm. So earlier you made a, a comment with a key word that I want to explore deeply together, that you had this aha connection in exploring your career growth and career vision and what does it look like to step out of your comfort zone and and crush comfort and all the things we talk about at Awaco, and connecting it to this idea of attitude, posture, and stance. This word stance. And I remember when you first shared with me this aha, that it absolutely resonated. And I don't have the judo background, but tell us more about this idea of stance.
Yeah, the I want to go back to an anecdote or a moment back when I was competing in judo, not very high level, but I was competing in a sort of a Midwest United States level tournament, and I was all pumped up. What am I going to do? What am I going to do to this, to my opponent? And my coach at the moment just said, "Hey, you don't have to do anything. You know everything. It's all about when you step on that mat, it's all about that first 2 seconds of attitude." And what he meant by that was the way you step into any arena, whether it's the mat, it's your presentation you're going to make, it's a big conference call, that first 2 to 3 minutes, or I should say, first 2 to 3 seconds actually, of how you enter that domain is what determines how the rest of the journey is going to play. And I've experienced that. I've gone into a judo match feeling I'm going to crush this guy. I know so much, and I came out as the loser. And I've gone into a judo match where I'm kind of nervous, but I know that my coach has told me I know everything, and I've surprised himself and myself coming out as the winner. So the stance is all that we can control, and if we go in with a very positive outlook, whether we win or lose, we're going to learn something from this. That's the that's the attitude that I've now been trying to foster in the recent months of growth, personal growth. Is it's not about we hear it as a cliche. It's not about the destination, but it's the journey. But I would like to rephrase that: is it's about the stance in the first instances that determines how the journey is going to be.
It's about the stance in the first instances. And I love how powerful that idea is. I want to go back, though, to something you said that I think is really challenging and confusing a lot of times when we think about or talk about the idea of what confidence looks like, what a confident or courageous maybe stance would look like in our minds, in our mindset, and the words we might use to describe it. You said I stepped onto the mat sometimes with this attitude of I'm going to crush this guy, kind of a outward looking at the opponent, and then you lost. And tell me about that attitude, because I think that's a really popular thing we see in sports, we see in movies, this kind of get pumped up around this idea of I'm going to crush the opponent. And I'm hearing you say like that energy is not the energy that you're looking for in your first 2 seconds. Like, what's the distinction there, and why are we so caught
Yeah,
up with that? Yeah.
yeah. I think the distinction is very subtle, and it's very easy to slip into either side of that window pane. But the reason I say that, it's a very controlled activity that you can do for the first few seconds. Because if you walked in and said, "I'm going to crush the other guy," you have just lost grip upon yourself,
Mm.
because your grip is already on the other person. In judo, the match starts without any grips. Your first goal is to get a grip on the other guy. So if mentally you're already gripping the guy, yeah, that seems like a positive play, but you don't have the grip yet. And because you don't have the grip yet, your mind is not focusing now on getting that grip because you think you've got the grip. So to boil it down to, actually, I want to take it to an engineer level, is
Please.
when we look at a problem in front of us, I don't think any professional engineer goes, "Oh, I'm going to get my hands all over that." As engineers, we boil it down to which part of that big problem do we understand facts around, and then we try to slowly get our grip on that, and we work our
Mm-hmm.
way in that. That's exactly how it works on judo. You get his sleeve, and then you kind of inch your way up the sleeve, and then he lets go of the sleeve, you get the other sleeve, and you kind of just slowly get your hands into as much of his grip you can get, or his gi.
Hmm.
And when you think you've got enough, internally you feel that the energy is moving towards you. You move in with your throw. I've not seen. I've been that judo player that has just gone and bear hugged the guy and tried to launch whatever I know, and I'm on the floor. He just threw me.
This is really a beautiful metaphor to say, look, when you step onto the mat in your life, the moments of life where you have a challenge, an opponent, an area that you're struggling with, maybe it's not even a big negative thing. It could be a great opportunity, could be a loving relationship, then you're reconnecting. Maybe it's a daily interaction with your spouse. Like, it doesn't matter even the context. It's to say, when I step into that arena, when I step onto that mat, those first few moments, starting with an inward grip, a grounding within myself of how I want to be and what I need to be in this moment, to then begin having the impact in the world that I want to have outward and starting to get that grip. Infinitely scalable, and it's how that might apply in our lives. You gave a great example for engineers on a problem, but how else does this impact you day to day? Where do you have this thought, and how does it change the way that you live?
Yeah, Zach, actually wanted to send out a note to you a few weeks ago because I remember our very first conversation. You talked about a concept called framing, and at the time, I kind of thought, okay, framing. This sounds like you're again creating agendas before you go into a meeting, but it was more than that. I realized that framing is that moment where you check in with yourself and you check in with the other person, that this is what we're going to be doing today. Is that okay? And I think that relates to what I was just talking about. Checking in with yourself for any activity is to find out how are you doing today. Recently, because of the word framing and understanding that a little bit deeper and connecting it to my martial arts background, I've found that as I have conversations with my colleagues, I've been able to be very conscientious of their time and my time. And I've been able to communicate to them that this time we've carved for each other is going to be a quality time, because I've got things that I would like to cover. What else is it that you'd like to cover? I've become very intentional with that conversation. It might
Yes.
sound awkward to some people, but I think I've not yet had anyone tell me after that that, oh, that was a waste of my time. They've actually, a couple of people have thanked me for giving them back 10 minutes of the assigned meeting time. Um, I now reflect that as, yeah, that's actually what happens even when you're on a judo mat or in a martial arts tournament. The match time is 5 minutes. Nobody said you need to take 5 minutes to throw the guy. So it's not
Yeah.
about throwing, but to come out as accomplishing your target. It could be 1 minute, it could be 2 minutes. But if you get a grip on yourself before, check in
Yes.
with yourself, check in with the other person, you could be more efficient on everybody's time, and also enable everybody has got what they intended for that time.
For the engineer listening, if they're wondering what is this framing thing that Hansel's talking about, you give a good example, but just to put it in a box, in any interaction with another engineer, with a team, if you're giving a presentation, it's almost irrelevant the context, but you're creating the container, in essence, the 5 minutes and the mat, and we're saying, hey, here is the space that we're going to occupy together, and in our time, this is what we would like to accomplish. And so the framing in very practical terms would be, hey, Hansel, it's really amazing to have some time with you today. What I'd love to do is record an episode of the Happy Engineer podcast with you. We'll take about half an hour. And during that time, I'd love to explore a few of the key learnings you had in our program and learn more about martial arts with you and give you a chance to share your heart and your wisdom with our audience. And then at the end, maybe we'll have a few minutes we can just catch up. Does that sound good to you? And
Yeah.
sounds great. So he says yes. Yeah, I'd say 99% of the time you get a yeah, that sounds great. The framing, what I love about this connection, it's a really great example that I have made known what I need to get from this situation that's in benefit or connected to the agenda of the time. And I've in essence not only grounded myself in my stance, but I've also made it known my intention to the other person, what I'm here to accomplish. I'm going to throw you today. This is the plan, and people respond really well to seeing and being given clarity on my needs, what we are here to do. And so often we don't express what needs to happen, and we don't stand strong for the things that must occur for our agenda. We feel selfish, or we feel like we don't have the control, or maybe I don't have the title, or I don't have the authority. So simple concept and a really great metaphor around this idea of stance. Hansel, tell me then, what would be the words rather than I'm going to crush this guy? If you were going to describe the stance that you do bring into some key moments of your life, how would you describe it in words for people? What is Hansel's stance?
I would use the word collected, as in you've done some reflection and bundled up your thoughts. There are some uncomfortable thoughts, there are some comfortable thoughts, but I'm collected.
I love that.
I would say another stance would be chest up and forward, not on back foot, leaning back.
Mm,
And the reason I say that is, and Zach, you and I have talked about this, even in a presentation, as you stand before an audience, if you're always on your back foot in the corner of the projector, the audience very quickly reads that energy and they say, okay, he's running away from his slides, literally speaking.
yes.
Versus you are not staring back at the screen, you're in the middle of the room, you're kind of taking a few steps left and right, but you're really engaging with everybody. You can't establish that after you've gone to the back of the room, you know. But if you do that in the beginning of the presentation, even if you withdraw for a moment later on, the audience is looking because they think this is planned. This guy has got a plan here.
I love the word energy and how you describe that. And just for the engineer listening, this isn't only in a physical presentation kind of environment like Hansel's talking about. It also applies even, people who see this on YouTube, the podcast, you won't be able to see, but as we record this, when Hansel said chest up and in, it immediately triggered me to do this exact same movement and bringing my energy up when he changed his energy. And it's the same on Zoom or in any other context. It can even be translated over the phone just through your voice and the energy that you communicate there. There's so much that happens. And so the connection between these ideas, it's not just philosophy, it's very real in the physical, and it impacts our body through, in our subconscious mind in a lot of ways that are extremely influential. And, I wasn't expecting you to change my posture just there, but just by doing that, it happened. And so I think I just want engineers to understand that these are really important concepts, because you might be thinking, how do I land this next interview? Or how do I get that next promotion? And we're thinking about these tactical things. Well, lots of what separates the very upper echelon or that best candidate from the majority are these small things. It's not that they have a degree from a better school than you, or they said a better example of how they are great with teams in a behavioral interview. It's the way that they influence people through these micro behaviors and the energy and the stance that Hansel's talking about. I don't know, Hansel, if that triggers anything for you, but would you agree with that, or what have you experienced with that?
Yeah, recently, you mentioned Zoom and Teams. We are all, well, some in some countries we are still doing web-based meetings. I've noticed that if you're talking to a client and they're not on image, but you're on image, so you're projecting yourself, to me, that's a very positive way of showing them I'm not hiding behind a screen somewhere in the
Yeah.
corner of
Yeah.
Japan. I'm actually there staring at them. And I've gotten some very key questions answered. Now, I don't know whether it was, because they saw me on camera, but I believe that being able to deliver that energy visually and
Yes.
through audio gets gets people to believe in you, trust in you. They know that you're real. I know I'm preaching to the choir because we are all doing image-based work right now, but I think to be able to project your intention and your words
Yes.
physically via the camera is the next best to being in front of them.
Totally. So, speaking of being in Japan, you have had a really unique global experience in your lifetime and as an engineer and in your career. And Oeko is the oasis of courage. And when you went through our program, we spent some time unpacking this idea of courage in our career, what that looks like, and how it is a catalyst to things happening and creating results and getting out of our comfort zone. I'm really interested to hear you share some of your perspective around this idea of courage as it relates and interacts with culture between maybe a US culture and the Japanese culture, where it's different, but some of the points that maybe were surprisingly the same, or how you had to show up with courage in that context. What would you describe in terms of courage and culture and that interaction?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Zach. That's actually a very profound question because um, in typical and I'm by no means an expert on Japanese culture business. I'm a student of Japanese culture, just like everybody around me. But what I've noticed is courage is good to have, but courage is not good to demonstrate in Japanese business sense. And the reason is because people are coached in cohorts, and you're never encouraged to step outside your group. It's a group think society, which has positives and maybe some limitations. But because of that, showing up with courage has taken a different realm. For example, I'm a foreigner. I don't speak the language fluently. Therefore, one of the mindsets I had when I first came here is I cannot make phone calls on my own. I lived in that igloo shell for a while, and then I realized if you don't come out of that shell, nobody knows you're inside it. And so I started making customer phone calls on my own, which was the most harrowing experience. But once I stepped out of that, I made a ton of mistakes linguistically, probably made a ton of mistakes in terms of the honorific language usage, but the customers were the most graceful people I met. They gave me information, they
Wow.
talked slowly, they wrote back the conversation to me in an email so they knew I could translate it and get actually the key requirements that I was asking. So I learned a very big lesson from that, that my fixed mindset was telling me you don't know the language, you're not from here, you can't make these phone calls. My growth mindset said, give it a shot. What's the
Yes.
worst that's going to happen? Somebody hangs up on you, and nobody hung up on me till this day. So that has really fueled it has actually emphasized and boosted my why. And the why is I love to talk to customers. Why should I stop myself from picking up the phone and calling somebody and using the language that I know? And we just talked about energy. Energy is, I believe, 50% of the conversation.
Mm. Hmm.
So that's in a nutshell of what I've learned in Japan. It's all of my US training kind of helped me, but I was back to ground zero here. So I had to relearn this art of step outside what is your boundary of today.
Yes. This is a really subtle point you made, but I want to highlight it again, that courage is not something that has to be demonstrated in a boldly public way in the context of business or relationships. That courage, in many cases, is just happening inside your own heart and mind to shift from that fixed mindset to the growth mindset. And courage isn't always puffing your chest and banging on your chest like Tarzan and going out and doing something or being a hero. It really is something that begins, in many ways, a quiet, centered, grounded stance of shifting out of a fixed place and saying, I'll give it a shot. And it actually could be, in a way, silent. No one even sees the courage happening. It's just within yourself. And for folks who feel like they're not courageous, well, that's a choice that you are able to make. And it doesn't have to be grandiose or match someone else's, what you see as courage. It may just be you taking that one small, subtle step and picking up the phone and giving it a shot. So be honest with us, Hansel. What was it really like in your emotions and in the experience, that first phone call? Like, take us to that. When they answered the phone in Japanese, what were you experiencing?
Uh, I don't know if there's a word to describe it, but I don't know. I think I was sweating from my brain as well. Forget my hands and my, I was sweating in
Sweating
my
in the
brain.
brain.
Yeah, yeah. But I think I mixed the guy's name up. I asked, can I speak to, Mr. So and so, and I think I even mixed up his name, and the person said, "Oh, you mean this person?" I was like, "Yes." It's one of
Yeah.
those names where the two syllables can flip both ways, and I flipped it. And they called the person to the phone, and there was a 5 second silence, and he had to say, "Hello, is somebody there?" And oh yes, I'm Hansel from Celanese. Is it okay to speak right now? And yeah, it was those first 10 seconds where I think they were like a slow motion
Mm-hmm.
incident.
Mm-hmm. And after that call, what was the sort of coming down off of that sweating brain high? Like, tell us, where was the point where you realized that didn't kill me? It actually wasn't that bad. Tell us the arc of the growth for you.
Yeah. So it was during the call actually when I was trying to ask him a couple of. So I was asking what kind of chemical resistance do you need for this polymer, and I got the word for chemical resistance, but I think he didn't quite understand how. And then he put it together. It was during that at that moment that actually he said, "Oh, let me give you some more information." And I felt like, thank you, God, because I'm going to sit back. He's going to be telling me stuff, and I have a moment to recollect my thoughts and not hunt for the next word. And he did. He told me a bunch of stuff. Maybe I understood only 50% of it, but I was trying to just make some notes of words that I don't know. And as I came off that call and I said, "Thank you very much for your time today. And would it be okay to confirm all this by an email?" And he said, "Yes, I'll send you an email now," which actually I meant, can I send him an email and he would confirm? But he said, "No, I'll send you an email after this." So he was gracious
Yeah.
enough. So
Yes.
when I got off that call, I remember actually not sitting down, but walking outside my house and just kind of pacing a little bit.
Yeah. All that energy.
Yeah. And then coming back and actually going to a store nearby to get a snack for myself. So, it was before I joined your program, but Zach, that was what I learned. Go reward yourself.
I
And
love
I
it.
did. I went and bought a snack from the store and came back and sat down, and there was an email waiting for me. I mean, the guy had, to his word, written down an email with what we talked about.
I love it. Such a great story. And sometimes we're all guilty of making that next step seem like this huge insurmountable thing. And you mentioned the mindset, a fixed mindset. I don't speak the language, therefore I can't make these calls by myself. And that limitation, when you had the courage to just say, I'll give it a shot, you get to the other side of that and boom, suddenly a whole new realm of possibility is available to you. That's really, really amazing. So Hansel, if you were going to say one other really big shift for you in the last 6 months, as you've really been leaning into personal growth and development, is there anything else that stands out as like, this is what has shifted or changed in my mindset or my approach in that time?
Absolutely, Zach. And you and I have talked about this many times, but it has been around the use of my time and energy. And by that, I mean, we all have stuff that fills up our calendars literally from the minute we wake up in the morning and switch on our phone. There's stuff we can all put into there and pack it. Since I have been working with you, I am a very big proponent of the focus funnel, as you call it, but basically a funnel and efficiency of your day. What matters, when does it matter, and will it matter tomorrow? I've gone into a habit literally, and I'm not kidding. I've got into a habit of literally discriminating the tasks by that criteria, because in that I have found now a lot more time to meditate, to take little relaxing breaks in the middle of my day. Maybe my managers shouldn't know this, that I have time on my hand, but I have time on my hand because it's allowing me to think strategically for some customers that I cover. So I can actually take a walk and think, what am I going to do with that customer? Because they want to know about this product. How are we going to plan that launch a few months out? Uh, I would not have had that if I sat in front of my computer staring at my inbox
Yep.
and just going through the email drill, every
Yep.
minute. That's one big shift in my focus. And the other shift has been able to communicate that to my colleagues. I've told my colleagues I will look at email in the morning and in the afternoon. Anything urgent, you have my phone number. And between the times of 4 in the evening and 6 in the evening, I am with my family taking care of my kids, making sure they're fed, and as a family, we spend time at dinner. After 6, I probably will be coming back to catch up with some stuff at work. But that's my calendar that I've created for today's situation in my life.
There's so much we could dig into, and we don't have time today to explore. I'm sure the engineer listening is like, wait, how did he do that? What do you mean time and energy? And I want that life that you just described. A lot of us feel like we're in that endless rat race of the inbox is never at zero, and I'm a slave to not having enough time. And so I'll just say for now, those shifts Hansel talked about are super powerful. And if you need a coach, get a coach, because it's just so important to understand the relationship of time and energy and how to set the boundaries in place and communicate those and uphold those in a way that meets your vision and values for your life and your family. And the focus funnel, credit to whom credit is due, Rory Vaden and the book Procrastinate on Purpose, I would recommend everybody go grab a copy of that, is where you'll learn about the focus funnel. It's a really powerful framework that we show our clients. And so Hansel, I'd love to keep going. There's so much to discuss, but in the interest of time and getting you on with your day and letting the engineer listening not be with us for hours and hours, one of the things that I believe is a great engineering and great coaching have this in common: questions lead and answers follow. And so if the engineer listening to this conversation wants to be happy, what is the best question to lead them with?
I would say, what is my stance today? What is my stance now? Because the rest will happen with that stance. So ask yourself, what stance do you want to take to have a very good rest of your day, or rest of your month, or rest of your life?
Oof. Perfect place to end. What is your stance? I love it. Hansel, thank you so much for making time for this. If somebody listening wants the opportunity to either learn more about Celanese or to connect with you, is there any place you might point them to be able to catch up with who you are and what you're doing in your career?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Facebook, and I'm always open to new connections and learning from other people. So yeah,
Beautiful.
happy to connect.
Thank you so much for sharing your heart, your wisdom, and the connections between judo and the martial arts and our life as engineers and this incredibly powerful concept around stance. I hope everybody takes this and really not only thinks about it, but takes action on it. So Hansel, I hope we can do this again sometime. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Zach, and thank you for having a conversation with me, and really love what you've done for me as well.
Hello, my friend. Zach White here again, and I wanted to let you know that's all we've got for this episode of the Happy Engineer podcast. Thank you so much for investing your time with me today. It is an absolute pleasure to be able to bring you this content. Just as a reminder, it would be amazing if you would subscribe and share this episode with any other engineers you know who may benefit from this. And if you're like me, I hope that you'll take some notes and, more importantly, take action. In our audio version of the podcast on Apple Podcasts and any place that you go to find podcasts, there's a little more content from me about this episode in the debrief. If you really want to hear about how to put this into action, I'd encourage you to go grab that. But thank you for joining us for the video version of our interview today. And again, can't thank you enough for helping us to get the word out about the Happy Engineer podcast and what we're doing. If there's any way we can serve you, would love to do that. Go find us at oasisofcourage.com or reach out to me on social media at Oasis of Courage. And don't forget again to subscribe and click the bell to have notifications of upcoming releases of new episodes of the podcast. As always, I want to leave you with this. If you stay in your comfort zone, you're not going to grow. So let's crush comfort, create courage, and let's do this.